Now, ActionSA leader Herman Mashaba has promised to create 4.8 million jobs within 5 years and end load shedding in just 2 years. He was delivering the election manifesto priorities at the Ellis Park Arena in Johannesburg. This was the first time ActionSA tabled a manifesto since its formation 3.5 years ago. Newzroom Afrika's senior politics reporter Zianda Ngobo was there.
An ambitious national plan by ActionSA has been unveiled since the party was formed 3.5 years ago as it contests a general election for the very first time. Chief amongst them is the promise to create 4.8 million jobs within 5 years and reduce unemployment to 18%.
An ActionSA government will seek an average of 5% economic growth over 5 years by supporting entrepreneurs, decreasing the cost of doing business, and re-establishing South Africa as a viable investment and business destination.
The party has touted an opportunity fund which will replace the black economic empowerment policy in its current form. Instead, the Green Mamba intends to introduce what it calls an inclusive economic empowerment plan.
We will replace the compliance cost of existing empowerment legislation, estimated at between 4 and 6% of company profits with the Opportunity Fund levy. This new levy and legislation will apply for 30 years. This bold step introduces a 5% company tax for all companies, excluding SMMEs, and is projected to raise about 55.7 billion rands in the first year, and will grow in line with our annual growth of our country's economic performance.
Meanwhile, the party also believes that the current social relief grant is too little and a stimulus package is needed to flush money back into the economy.
Additionally, we will expand social welfare by implementing a universal basic income stimulus, UBSI, in addition to increasing existing grants. The stimulus, which is linked to poverty bands, will initially be paid for a period of 3 years through monthly cash transfers consisting of 633 rands in the first year, 1,058 rands in the second year, and 1,558 in the third year. We simply cannot be celebrating people being dependent on 350 or 370 rands a month.
When it comes to the country's energy woes, Mashaba has promised an end to load shedding in 2 years.
ActionSA government will take action to permanently end load shedding within 2 years in government. Earlier this month, I unveiled ActionSA's 9-point plan to end load shedding, stabilize energy provision, and introduce competition into our electricity market, alongside a streamlined ESCOM. This will ensure that businesses are no longer harmed when they have to close their doors when the electricity is off. Under our plan, we will end nepotism at ESCOM to ensure that the entity is staffed with highly skilled employees who are appointed based on merit and competency, not political affiliation.
True to form, ActionSA has maintained that the country's borders need to be closed and will employ tighter ways of managing the entry of goods and services moving in and out of the country. It also promises that life sentences will mean exactly that when it comes to jail terms, and wants to introduce hard labor for prisoners. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Zianda Ngobo at the Ellis Park Arena.
All right, let's bring you some analysis on this now with head of Center of Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution at the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, who's also a political analyst. A very good morning to you, Prof. Thank you for your time. Mashaba, of course, for the first time contesting national and provincial elections since the party's formation more than 3 years ago. What did you make of some of the bold promises he made? I mean, really just standing out for me as we face an electricity crisis, promising to end load shedding in 2 years, as opposed to the EFF, who said they'd end it in 6 months. What's your take?
So, at a glance, just to set the scene for the viewers at home, ActionSA rose to prominence in 2020 in August and participated for the first time at local government level in the elections, but they were confined to 2 provinces, namely Gauteng and KZN, and they did very well. That's why, for instance, they are involved in some coalition arrangements there. So these upcoming general elections are going to be very important for them because they're going to participate in them on a large scale for the first time. And it begs the question as to whether now that they are in the mix, are they going to change the lineup that we are normally used to of having the ANC as number 1, the DA and the EFF and the IFP. But coming back to your question, I think the manifesto struck the right chord. He spoke about, 5 areas that the party is going to focus on if it is elected into power. But I think what stood out for me is the issue of inclusive economy. He says that will replace triple BE because triple BE has created a scope for corruption. Of course, I mean, he's on point because we have seen people using social and political capital in pursuit of personal accumulation to amass wealth. But the point must be made that one of the things that we have seen in post-1994 has been the expansion of black middle class. That is partly because of racially inspired policies of Triple BE and also Employment Equity Act. So if you are critical of those policies, because also he spoke about, non-racialism. So if you are critical of those policies, that might not sit well with the majority of black people who have benefited out of those policies. Yes, of course, I mean, the black middle class has its own complexities of black tax and so on. So I think they need to tread carefully on that score. I like the idea of insourcing, though it strikes me as a conception that comes from the EFF. Remember, he introduced that while he was a mayor in Johannesburg. So I think what he did was to appropriate that idea. But the elephant in the room is the creation of 4.8 million jobs. I take that with a pinch of salt. I'm very critical of that because, the ANC in 2020, when they introduced the new growth path, they also had a target of 5 million jobs by 2020. That was in 2010. And that did not come to fruition. So I'm not sure if this target is realistic.
Yeah, and of course he expands on that to say which areas he believes will be under focus in efforts to create those jobs. He speaks about agriculture, he speaks about mining, green energy, and of course making reference to something relatable, saying that as a successful businessman who built Black Like Me during the apartheid era, he has never made promises that he cannot keep, but in taking action to show people what is possible.
Yes, he does have a history of getting the job done, of making commitments and honoring them. I think he stood out while he was a mayor. It could have been good if he was allowed to complete his term of office. We did see changes in Johannesburg when he held that position of mayorship on a large scale. So he is a leader, that is able to get the job done. But I think there was also an omission in the speech, which is what is happening on a global scale. Because you cannot talk about promoting development domestically as if domestic issues are not influenced by the international front. For instance, the war that is underway between Ukraine and Russia has had an impact on inflation, an increase of fuel, interest rates. So you've got to keep in touch with what is happening on a global scale and not only be inward looking. So I think he missed a golden opportunity there to lay bare the foreign policy posture of the party.
And yeah, because he was rather unapologetic about his plans to secure borders. And of course we know, you make reference of his term of office as mayor, the scrutiny and criticism he faced about his stance on illegal immigrants was really something of a large scale.
Yes, Mpo, we need to abide by the laws of the country. The rule of law must be applied. But at the same time, I think one should be cautious not to overplay this argument of foreign nationals, because by so doing you can incite violence on the ground. You can agitate people. So I think leaders, they need to be responsible. But also it begs the question as to where does the policy come from? Does it come from the party, or is it an opinion that he holds? Because he held that opinion before ActionSA was established. So I think that is quite interesting in my view. But I think time will tell, though.
What about load shedding? I mean, I did touch on it very briefly as you and I started our conversation. That promise, 2 years, the EFF said 6 months. And of course, we've heard a lot of people in the space speaking, making allegations about the deliberate intent to not sort and resolve this matter, saying that it can be resolved more speedily, but perhaps the suggestions around the allegations about why we are experiencing load shedding. I mean, a lot of conspiracy theories there.
I think Eskom has been used as a center of accumulation to amass wealth. It was also one of the institutions that were under the spotlight at the Zondo Commission. And I don't think that the ANC has done enough in terms of fixing the problem there. I think 2 years arguably can be a reasonable time, time frame to get the job done. Because I get the sense that the ANC, they don't have a political will to get the job done there. I also like the policy on energy. They believe in an energy mix, renewable energy and doing away with coal, but not completely, which is good though, so that, one can move with the times, as it were.
And the other thing, Professor, is perhaps Mashaba's stance on introducing and bringing back school inspectors, insofar as what we've seen and observed taking place in our schools across the country, the violence and, of course, the disruptions to education. How much of an impact could bringing back school inspectors have on upping the education spaces and ensuring some sort of stability and less of the vulnerability that we're seeing and learning of?
Well, Mpo, I went to school under the circumstances of apartheid, and in as much as the system was a violation of human rights, but at the same time, I think there was a sense of discipline in schools as opposed to the way things are at the moment. I think everyone would agree with me that at the moment, the way things are is not the way things should be. So I don't think that he was off the mark there. in terms of introducing that system of bringing officials to come and see if teachers are getting the job done, and so on.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. Let's perhaps leave it there for now as we round down that conversation with Ntsikelelo Breakfast, professor, of course, talking to us about some of the reaction and the highlights coming out of the ActionSA's elections manifesto, political analyst there. And